Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's special live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this stream on YouTube or on Rumble. Today is going to be a special stream because while the title mentions Loomer, I think that this is going to be more about Donald Trump's meeting with Abu Muhammad al-Julani and Laura Loomer's fake outrage about this meeting, and why I think it is fake, it is dishonest, and what is she not telling her audience when it comes to Syria. I think most of you already know that, but we're going to go a little bit in depth, and we're going to show you that there are a lot more than these simplistic arguments that she is raising about Syria, because she has a special, I would say, agenda when it comes to Syria, and that is definitely about Israel. Now, we're going also to discuss how the economic hitman arrived to Syria. I'm sure most of you know the economic hitman. If you haven't watched one of the documentaries, mini documentaries, which addresses John Perkins' Confessions of an Economic Hitman, we're going to go through all of that. However, as you're watching this stream, if you want to support this work, the easy thing to do is just hit the like button. Hit the like button, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and this content will receive 2 more people, because I assure you what we're going to discuss on this channel is definitely going to be rich with information, with politics, with historical context, and we're going to reach into certain conclusions, which in my opinion takes a lot of time to come to such conclusions. However, nowadays we have a lot of factors in our hands that we could conclusively say that Syria's future economy is going to be IMF's economy. And on the 9th of December 2024, one day after the regime change, I wrote a very long post on Facebook in Arabic and on X, the same version in English, and I said that Syria's military is going to be just like the Palestinian Authority's army, which is just the police, and this is what we're seeing nowadays. And the second thing I said, that Syria's economy is going to be privatized, and the Syrian people will celebrate in the streets, although the people who really would own the Syrian economy are telling them you will own nothing and you will be happy. And now the economic hitman also reached to Syria, because Julani met with the head of the IMF in the United States. Can you believe that? The head of the IMF received Abu Muhammad al-Julani and called him, "Mr. President, I'm so happy to see you. I'm so proud of you. You're such a good man. You're such a good boy. We're going to suck your country dry. Thank you so much for visiting us. We're going to give you lots of loans. And these loans are politically conditioned, and you're going to obey us, and we're going to turn Syria into an arena, a yard, a field for our investors. And our investors are going to send all the money to your country, on which you will gain very little, and we will gain a lot, because this money will be recycled, and it will just go into the pockets of the corporation. So brace yourself, Mr. President, because we're going to work together, and if you don't do whatever we want you to do, then we have some escalatory measures against you, because remember, Mr. President, we love you so much and we care about you, and we will put a chain on your neck, and once you try to free yourself from this chain, first of all, we will try to pet you. We'll say you're a good boy, stay with us, and all these things. We'll try to persuade you. And if you try a little bit harder, very bad things will happen to you, Mr. President. So be careful about that. This is what's going to happen. So, guys, President Donald Trump apparently met with a self-selected president. Some people say it's the CIA MI6 selected president, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, calling himself Ahmad al-Sharaa, at the White House on November 10th, 2025, marking the first such visit by a Syrian head of state since independence in 1946. Congratulations, CIA. The closed-door talks follow Julani's 2024 overthrow of Bashar al-Assad, which, of course, he didn't do it. The regional countries did it. And recent U.S. removal of Julani from the terrorist list that they have, that they can just put your name in it, and if you're a good boy, they remove your name from it. If you're not a good boy for them, you go back to the terrorist list, basically, right? And Julani says that this new alliance with the US means that Ahmad al-Sharaa is going to join the US-led coalition against Abu Muhammad al-Julani, because he says that he will join the US efforts against ISIS. Funny. So they also spoke about lifting sanctions and reconstruction. So, guys, this guy says that he is now reformed and he would like to join the US efforts against ISIS. I think the last live streaming, somebody says that I should go into construction field, because I said, if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you. I also have lots of things to sell to the people who believe that Julani is a reformed and a moderate rebel nowadays, that he is the president of Syria. Anyways, Laura Loomer was upset by this meeting, and the first thing she thought of doing, not to go and ask the opinion of the Americans. I mean, she's American, right? But she flew to Israel. She flew to Israel, and she is talking to Israeli citizens, some of whom are from the Druze community, and she's asking their opinion about Donald Trump's meeting with Abu Muhammad al-Julani. Now, there is a saying in Arabic. Let's see, what is this, the translation. حق يراد منه باطل. حق يراد به باطل بالإنجليزي. حق يراد به باطل is like to say something that sounds honest and true when it actually being used with bad intentions to mislead people to believe it as true. Its translation literally is a word of truth by which falsehood is intended, right? Because what Laura Loomer says is true. She says Syria's new president, Syria's new ISIS president, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, an Islamic terrorist who was wanted by the US government for a $10 million bounty until May 2025, just arrived in the US for his November 10th meeting with President Trump at the White House. She says, I traveled to the Syrian border this week, where I met with and interviewed members of the Druze community who have been impacted by Julani's Islamic-inspired mass killings and kidnappings. On the Syrian border in Majd al-Shams is, by the way, a Syrian town occupied by Israel. And of course, she doesn't mention that, and she says this is Israel. Anyways, I documented the truths about Julani and his continued Islamic persecution of religious minorities, including the Druze, Christian, and Alawites. I was shown horrific videos and photos of recent murders and rapes of Druze people committed by Julani's forces, particularly in Sweda, the capital of the predominantly Druze al-Sweda governorate in southern Syria, home to the country's largest Druze community. President Trump, she tags him, POTUS, please demand that Julani stop committing mass murder of non-Muslims in Syria. Our US tax dollars were just sent to Syria on October 27 to provide life-saving humanitarian aid for the Druze and Christians in Syria. We wouldn't be needing to send that aid to Syria if Julani and his ISIS insurgents stop committing acts of Islamic terror against non-Muslims living under Julani's regime. US officials cannot shake hands with jihadists a jihadist terrorist in the Oval Office as a genocide against the Druze is happening before our eyes. So, Laura Loomer, all in all, is correct about few things. That Julani was and still is ISIS. Because ISIS is not an organization. ISIS is a mentality. ISIS is a mental illness that has infected, unfortunately, I don't want to give any percentage, but considerable number of people in their brains. And they think that they are capable of establishing so-called Islamic State through violence, terrorism, decapitation, slaughtering people, the purification of the societies, which means genocide against Islamic minorities first and non-Islamic people. Unfortunately, this phenomenon has gained momentum in the region, especially after the Syrian war, because the people who planned the Syrian war and pushed for the Syrian war, they had a brilliant idea, as Hillary Clinton put it in the past when she was talking about the support of the US to al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. They wanted to copy the same strategy because basically in Syria, who's going to carry the fighting? Who is going to wage a war against an army, a national army with tens of thousands of soldiers and aspire to kill and get killed, basically? These people are not going to be leftists. They're not the socialists. They're not the communists. Nobody wants to put the suicide vest and say, this is for Marx, this is for Lenin, I don't know, this is for some national icon. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody will drive a car bomb and go and say, this is for a left-wing cause. But brainless people, brainwashed people who think that after they blow themselves up, that they will go directly to paradise, that they have to meet their 72 virgins, that they will have a lunch with the prophet. This is what they're being told in the past decade or two. Those people will do such things. And mostly those people are young, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, brainwashed young people who have no prospect in life. Meanwhile, the person who is indoctrinating them and telling them, my son, you're going now to a suicide mission. And once you finish your suicide mission, you will meet your prophet, you will have a lunch with him, and you will enjoy your Hur al-Ain, all the virgins in paradise. But this young, uneducated, uninformed, low IQ, retarded, stupid person doesn't even ask that other person next to him, if I blow myself up and I'm going to meet with the prophet, as you say, and I'm going to enjoy the paradise, and I'm going to enjoy the virgins, and I'm going to see rivers of honey, rivers of milk, then why don't you do it? If everything after blowing myself up is all beauty, then why don't you do it? Nobody asks that question. Do you notice that? So, of course, Julani is still ISIS because he believes in the ideas of ISIS, right? So Laura Loomer is definitely correct on that. She's also correct that Julani has waged a genocidal war against the Alawites in the coastal city. He killed around 1,500 people only in 3 days. And then, I don't know what's the number, but I think it's above 2,000 Druze minority Syrians in the Sweda. Those are all correct. But there is a big but in Laura Loomer's narrative. And that is, she will never tell you, why do we have this situation in Syria? Was the situation in Syria like this 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 14 years ago? Were the minorities being hunted down? Were they being killed on a daily basis because of their faith? What has changed after 2011 that these atrocities started to happen? In every country, you have radicalized people, you have psychopathic people, you have people, serial killers, you have retarded people, you have radical people, you have a certain percentage of people that are definitely radicals, right? So if somebody pours tens of billions of dollars, let's say, in the United States and gives tens of tons of weapons, ammunition, anti-tank rockets, anti-aircraft shoulder hold rockets, etc., to some groups in the United States, then you will also create a civil war there, right? You will also empower the radicals and also encourage other people to join the radicals because they are the winning side. Now, one of the parties which she will never mention, one of the parties which supported Julani's ascendance to power is none other than Israel. Israel supported the ascendance of Julani to power through different means. So, the beginning of the war itself, the operation to start Operation Timber Sycamore to arm the jihadists, Al-Qaeda, ISIS types in Syria was an idea by the neocons and the Zionists in the United States, on whom the AIPAC and the Israel lobby have an enormous influence. And they bribed many of the politicians who encouraged this Operation Timber Sycamore, and they persuaded Barack Obama to start this operation, right? Because Syria represented a multifolded challenge for Israel in the region, one of which is its military capabilities, the second is its national economy, the third, its regional influence over other countries, especially in Lebanon, supporting the Palestinian Hezbollah, the Lebanese Hezbollah, and the Palestinian Hamas, Jihad, etc. Regardless of what your opinion of these groups, the truth of the matter is that the trigger and the start of this war was because Israel wanted to neutralize what they called this threat, right? So it had nothing to do with democracy, human rights, and all these cliches that we heard. Syria didn't pose any threat to the United States, so the only threat that Syria posed was to Israel, right? Whether it's through economic means or military means, its role in the region, and also its role in arming, basically, non-state actors and training them, in some cases, who were a serious challenge to the Israeli expansionist policy in the region. That's why they wanted for this to start. So from the beginning, if we don't put this into proper context and tell the people the truth, why the war started and why the regime change were initiated and planned by the US started in Syria, then we're fooling ourselves. If we're talking about democracy, human rights, that the US came with a good heart, manners to support the Syrian people, then I think whoever believe in this, I mean, again, I don't want to talk about all the bridges that I'm going to sell, but I think it's beyond us. It's time for people to accept the reality. And if 10 years ago it was difficult for them to accept the reality, I think it is very, very clear nowadays who stands behind this war. The second thing that Laura Loomer will never acknowledge is that Israel in the past 14 years conducted thousands, right? The numbers of over 2,000 airstrikes against the former Syrian army positions. Meanwhile, the Syrian army was fighting against these terrorist groups. There are so many incidences on the border contact line between the Golan and Quneitira, in Daraa, in Damascus, in Palmyra, in Deir ez-Zor, that Israeli and American fighter jets, as the Syrian army, the former National Syrian Army, was face-to-face, tete-a-tete, fighting against ISIS and Al-Qaeda, led by Julani, Israeli and American fighter jets were bombing Syrian army positions. And when the Syrian army was shooting against these Julani terrorists, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda types, in southern Syria, the Julani terrorist militants, they used to go to the Golan Heights field hospitals operated by the Israelis, receive medical treatment, shake hands with Benjamin Netanyahu. There are footage, you can check it yourself. Their leadership used to take cash money from Israel and light weapons and send them back to Syria. Those are facts, right? Another important thing, which I think we should also take it seriously, is the confession of Benjamin Netanyahu taking credit for ousting Assad. Now, when you oust Assad and you see that these regional powers agreed on Julani, if you, as an Israeli leader, prime minister, were so terrified of Julani and you don't want him to take over Damascus, you could have killed him. You could have killed him as he was driving like it's a road trip from Aleppo to Damascus without any resistance in a pickup truck, going all the way, meeting with CNN, BBC on the way, Channel 4. Everybody knew where he is. So if Israel was so terrified of Julani, they could have killed him. They wouldn't have allowed him to take over Damascus. And let's suppose Julani was so immune against the Israeli operations and he survived assassinations, etc. Well, Julani nowadays, he's in Damascus. His office is known. It's not like he's hiding in a bunker. And if he posed any threat against Israel, they would have killed him by now. They went after Nasrallah and dropped 85 tons of explosives. They went after Ismail Haniyeh, Ismail Haniyeh, right? Yeah, which I'm not a fan of anyways, but they went after him in Tehran and killed him. They went after Sinwar and killed him. They went after all the leadership of Hezbollah. They used all sorts of AI, tech, drone, cameras, spies on the ground, spying on your smartphones and telecommunications to kill the entire military and security leadership of Hezbollah. Meanwhile, Julani is driving his car like he's and playing basketball with the leader of with the head of CENTCOM. By the way, I'm going to show you that video. So if they wanted to kill him, all I'm saying is, if they wanted to kill him, if he was any threat to Israel, they would have eliminated him by now. But they don't want to. They don't want to kill Julani. They want for Julani to stay and govern in certain places in Syria, and those are Aleppo, Idlib, Hama, Homs, and Damascus. Beyond that, this is the agenda of Israel, and this is the same agenda of Laura Loomer, and that is why she is in Israel, to push for the idea that the minorities cannot coexist with this terrorist regime, which is true. Nobody wants to live with them, with these Julani talks. But instead of creating, let's say, an autonomy of these countries that are self-sufficient, they want mini states in Syria that are dependent on Israeli security architecture. And that is, I, as Israel, will protect you, although I helped Julani to come to power. It's a very multi-layered and complicated strategy that Israel adopted, and they were successful. And I am impressed, to be honest with you, by the Israeli planning. I'm impressed by how Israel can reach its strategic goals, whether in Syria, whether in Lebanon, whether in Palestine. I'm saying this as someone who is very critical of Israel, and I think that they have no limits in their imagination. How would they reach their goals? Like, imagine you have the former head of Mossad saying that we have compromised smartphones and electronics all over the world, which means these electronics could have explosives in them, like they did with the pagers. They could have spying software or spying hardware in them. They have no limits for their imagination for the pursuit of reaching their goals. And if the head of Al-Qaeda and the deputy leader of ISIS is a necessary figure for them in Syria to divide the country on vertical lines, to tell to the people, look, those are terrorists, you cannot live with them and coexist with them, so I'm your protector, they will do that. And they're doing that. So this is what also Laura Loomer won't say. That Israel wants for Julani to stay, but in a decentralized Syria, right? So they're using the pain and the suffering and this genocidal war of Julani against Syria's ethnic and religious minorities in order to divide Syria, balkanize Syria even further. We also have to remember what Netanyahu said, that when the Iranians were trying to bring some air support to Assad, that he sent F-16s to the borders with Iraq and blocked their flight into Syria so they would help the regime, they would help the toppling of the regime. And then they allowed Julani to come to power. Anyways, now after the regime changed, Donald Trump said several times, by the way, and this is the first time when he said, this was in March, May last year when he met with Benjamin Netanyahu. This was in July 2025. In the presence of Bibi, right? Bibi is there, and he's literally telling and saying that he lifted the sanctions on Syria on the request of Israel and Turkey, of course, and Saudi Arabia. So if Donald Trump was saying anything here that is factually incorrect, right, Benjamin Netanyahu would have intervened and said, no, this is incorrect.
You know, at the request of a lot of countries in the surrounding area of the Middle East, including Bibi, we took the sanctions off Syria, and I met the new leader. I was very impressed by him. Somebody said, well, he comes from a very tough background. I said, well, you know, I'm not that surprised. It's a tough part of the world. You know, at the
request of several neighboring countries, including Israel, the US lifted the sanctions on Syria. This was in July 2025, right, as Netanyahu visited Trump for the 100th time last year. But only recently and yesterday, before he met with Julani, Trump also reiterated this point, and that is he lifted the sanctions on Syria again for the sake of Israel.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Fox.
Will you discuss the Abraham Accords when you meet with the president of Syria?
Well, we're going to meet, and I think he's doing a very good job. It's a tough neighborhood, and he's a tough guy, but I got along with him very well, and a lot of progress has been made with Syria. That's a tough one, but a lot of progress has been made. You know, we took the sanctions off at the request of Turkey, at the request of actually Israel, at the request of a few different countries, and we took the sanctions off to give them a chance.
So nobody is asking here the question, why would Israel ask Donald Trump to lift the sanctions if they hate Julani so much? If Julani is this hated person that the Israelis, I'm talking about the Israeli government, right? Israeli government cannot tolerate the presence of this guy. Okay, they don't want to do something extraordinary. They have never done it before, right? Like they have never assassinated someone. They have never killed someone outside their borders. That things never, they don't do such things, you know, Israeli. officials are so clean-handed, they don't shed blood anywhere around the world. Let's suppose that is true. At least they would ask Donald Trump, don't lift the sanctions on Julani's regime or on the Syrian economy. And I'm not for sanctioning the Syrian economy, don't get me wrong, because the people who get affected the most by the sanctions are the ordinary people, right? But all I'm saying, I'm asking a simple and logical question. If I'm saying Israel is terrified by Julani and the massacres he commits against the minorities, then why would they ask Donald Trump to lift the sanctions, which will empower and give more financial means to the Julani regime to continue the spree of killing of the minorities, right? Is that not a legitimate question? I don't know how we live in a serious world when no journalists ask that question. Anyways, I want to remind you of this video, which I like a lot. And this is when Julani's militants used to go to the Golan Heights hospitals to receive medical treatment. And this is the former head of the Mossad being questioned by Mehdi Hassan. This is one of the few videos which I always say that Mehdi did a great journalistic job when he questioned the head of Mossad and asked him, are you guys receiving Al-Qaeda terrorists in your hospitals? Are you not afraid of a blowback? He says, no, we're not afraid of a blowback. Why would they be afraid of a blowback if these people are the US assets, CIA assets, MI6 assets, MIT assets? Those are supported by our allies. Why would we be afraid of them, right?
There have been reports that Israel has been treating wounded Syrian rebel fighters in its hospitals on the border, including fighters from Nusra Front, which is, of course, the al-Qaeda proxy in Syria. Do those reports worry you that Israel's helping wounded al-Qaeda-aligned fighters?
As I said before, in a different context, it's always useful also to deal with your enemies in a humane way. And I think that when you have people who are wounded and you can deal with them in a humane way, the considerations as to whether to take them in are not simply whether it's politically useful or whether it's politically
So it's purely humanitarian, you say. So there's no tactical or political strategic...
I didn't say there's no tactical. I said the main consideration, the immediate consideration is humane.
But the tactical issues involved, I mean, you know better than me the phrase blowback. You don't think there's going to be blowback against Israel if you get into bed with a group like Nusra Front?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's going to be blowback.
Why?
Because I think that, unfortunately, the rules of the game in Syria are such that you can do anything that is not possible to be done anywhere else.
Yeah, I think people said that in Afghanistan too. Would you also treat Hezbollah fighters?
No, I would not treat...
Have you not just contradicted what you told me 60 seconds ago about humanely treating your enemies?
No. I think as far as Hezbollah fighters are concerned, with them we have a different account.
So let me be clear, you're happy to treat al-Qaeda fighters, but not Hezbollah fighters?
We have a different account with Hezbollah, a totally different account, because Hezbollah has carried out the type of actions against us which preclude us from going into what the al-Qaeda has done. Al-Qaeda, to the best of my recollection, has up to now not attacked Israel.
But it's attacked your number one ally and protector and sponsor, the United States.
That's not the right question, by the way. The right question is, and I'm not calling for violence against Israel, just for YouTube and for the Stasis watching this stream. Two questions, actually. If Israeli army is ready to receive al-Qaeda wounded fighters, terrorists, in Al-Golan hospitals and give them medical treatment for humanitarian reasons, would they give similar treatment for Hezbollah? He said no. Would they give it to Hamas? No. Because according to his memory, that Al-Qaeda has never attacked Israel. Right? But the entire premise of Al-Qaeda is that they are here to champion the persecuted Muslims. This is how they claim, right? What they claim. So if that is the case, Again, I'm not calling for violence against Israel. If that is the case, why Al-Qaeda hasn't tried even once to attack Israel? I don't want them to do that. I would despise them if they do that even more. But it's a simple question. Why never Qaeda or ISIS attacked Israel? They attacked everyone in the region, almost everyone, but mostly focusing on the enemies of the United States, but never once against Israel. It sounds strange, right? The way he's saying. The truth of the matter is, Julani was and still is a CIA asset. And the Israelis know that. And they were helping the materialization of the American strategy in Syria. And they helped the US in Operation Timber Sycamore. They were a serious party in the conflict in Syria. They waged hundreds of strikes. They conducted hundreds of strikes in Syria during the war. That played a role in the outcome, in shaping the outcome of the Syrian war, right? Something that is very, in my opinion, sometimes it takes 10 years for people to come to the realization that they were duped, that they were fooled, that they thought that Julani is some revolutionary figure. They thought that Julani is some Islamic leader who is going to liberate the Muslims of Syria. And they thought and thought and thought, especially those so-called Arab intellectuals. If you guys were shocked by the intellectual class in some of your countries, you have to see the intellectual class in the Arab world. I mean, let's not generalize, but there is a big number of Arab intellectuals who are so corrupted by Saudi money, by Qatari money, by Turkish money, by Israeli money. And in my opinion, the so-called intellectuals they're the ones who can justify their treason of their own people and their country in the best way possible, because they're the ones who can do a better talking and better convincing points. It's incredible how many intellectuals in the Arab world were in support of a CIA engineered insurgency in Syria. Although all the papers are there, like you can show them documents, you can show them leaked documents, whether it is from the DIA, whether it's WikiLeaks, whether it's Hillary Clinton's emails, whether it's statements, confessions, and they still call you an Assadist. Like, do you understand the gravity of the matter? Like, if I am going to convince you something on this channel and I show you, let's say, evidence, right? And I brought to you evidence 1, evidence 2, evidence 3, evidence 4, and I'm showing you the sources. If after showing you all the pile of evidence, you call me an Assadist, then I think in my mind that this intellectual, which has a doctor before his name, because they're all doctors, like doctor something, poems, writers, authors, think tanks, research centers, etc. You would think that they're smart. But I come to the conclusion and the realization that all these titles before their names mean nothing when it comes to assessing the intellect of the person and the honesty of the person. Has nothing to do. Those are just socially constructed titles that gives these people fake credibility in the eyes of the people to sell certain narratives to the people in the name of, oh, this person is a doctor, he's a doctor in political science. How can be he wrong, right? But you show this person documents, evidence, sometimes even proof, and they continue saying and repeating the same cassette, like you remember back in the day when we used to have these small cassettes It's like it rewinds itself. It repeats itself. It's the same. In Arabic, we say like istuwane. It's like repeating the same istuwane over and over again. In my opinion, if you show the people, this intellectual class, all this evidence, and they continue on the same opinion, then they are either not that intellectual, their intellectual level is not that competent as they claim to be, or they're collaborators. I don't see any other way, you know. Therefore, now that people are acting shocked that Julani, after he reached going as a conqueror of Jerusalem, but rather he's playing basketball with the head of CENTCOM, these people are one of the two. They were either too stupid, despite the titles, or they were collaborators and they knew the reality of Julani, but it's now too exposed, it's so blatant that they have to say something, because they sell their image as being, this pro-Palestine, we are anti-imperialists, we are this and that. But now they themselves were exposed in the eyes of the people. They have to make some criticism of Julani because their own credibility is now at stake. And I think they also feel that they were used by these powers and they squeezed them like a lemon, and it's now time for them, like when you squeeze the lemon and then you throw the shelf, right? So as Julani now visited the US, guys, just watch this photo, please. Just check this photo and tell me how you feel about it and what do you think about this photo. This is a photo between Julani, and the guy next to him is none other than Brian Mast, right? And I'm sure most of you know who is Brian Mast. So if you see this photo of Julani with Brian Mast, and if you still can't see what's happening between Julani, the United States, and Israel, then honestly, even God himself won't be able to save you, right? And this is Brian Mast, basically, after October 7, wearing the IDF uniform inside Congress, right? This is in December 2024. He goes to work with an IDF uniform. He volunteered in the IDF. This is in 2015. He volunteered in the IDF. And if you want to know more about his opinion of the Palestinians, and we're not talking about Hamas, we're not talking about any armed militant group, we're just talking about ordinary Palestinian civilians who have nothing but an aspiration to live. That's it. They just want to live their lives.
I would encourage the other side to not so lightly throw around the idea of innocent Palestinian civilians, as is frequently said. I don't think we would so lightly throw around the term innocent Nazi civilians during World War II. We're going to speak later about a bill related to Palestinian education and the fact that in their schools run by the Palestinian Authority, not Hamas, not Palestinian Islamic Jihad, not Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, not Lion's Den, not any of the other groups, run by the Palestinian Authority, the anti-Semitic teachings that they put within their own schools, right? The list goes on and on of the examples we could give of what somebody might just call a rank and file Gazan or a rank and file person in the West Bank or just a Palestinian that maybe they don't say falls under that name of Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad, but by any classical definition would absolutely be considered a terrorist, somebody that in the last couple of weeks had been conducting kidnappings, murders, brutality that is nearly unspeakable. So there's not this far stretch to say there are very few innocent Palestinian civilians.
There are very few innocent Palestinian civilians, okay?
I haven't seen the videos of the innocent Palestinian civilians that were out there trying to protect the Israelis, that were out there trying to stop the attacks, trying to get the captives returned instead of being taken into tunnel systems. And so look at that as well when we think about the equipment, whether agricultural or otherwise, that might be put in the hands of those terrorists.
So, guys, there is very, very few innocent people in Palestine. The majority are either terrorists or children of terrorists or anti-Semites. And therefore, killing them is okay, like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. If you dehumanize your opponent to this extent, then you're giving the permission to kill them and the justification after killing tens of thousands of them, right? And this is the guy now meeting with Julani. But we are told that Julani is now joining the fight against ISIS, right? This is another mockery, a mockery that can't be explained but with laughter, because this is the video they published before Julani landed in Washington, D.C. They published this video on this Syrian state TV, basically showing a fake raid somewhere in Aleppo. And they say that the Julani armed forces raided a nest for ISIS, and they have captured a few ISIS terrorists. It's so fake that they have all the cameras with them anyways, ready, and they're knocking the door, because nothing says raiding on an ISIS cell but knocking the door, you know? You knock the door, knock, knock. It's the Julani regime. We came to detain the ISIS cell here. Are you here? Look at this idiot. Like, look at this clown here. He calls himself a journalist. He's just using him as like a like he's there to report, you know. Look at this mockery of information. They're all looking into the camera. Look at these people. Like, if you're in a raid, if you are in a raid and there is an opponent and he's an ISIS and he could be armed, right? He could have a suicide belt. Would you be looking into the camera here? Like, oh, are you recording me? Look at put me into the screen. Look. This is the fakest raid I've ever seen in my life. Look at this. And look at this ISIS. Look at this unorganized raid anyways. Like, everybody is somewhere. Somebody's looking north, somebody's looking south, somebody is they're not even wearing one uniform. Look. Did he knock the door? This is just a photo op, you know. This is just for foreign consumption. Like, before Julani goes to he's knocking the door again. افتحوا لك وحش beast, you are a beast. So before he goes to the United States, they published this fake raid to the people, so that to the American audience, basically, that look, we are also targeting ISIS here. We're no longer ISIS. And then you have journalists working for Reuters, basically circulating fake news. This guy works for Reuters, and he has been, you know, being very nice to Julani in the past months. He says this is a scoop for him. Syria foiled 2 Islamic State plots to assassinate President al-Sharaa in the past months. I'm so tired. I'm so tired of the ridiculousness of these developments, that it's so exposed. It's so, even the way they're trying to cover it up, it's so amateurish. Like, everybody can see through, you know. But still, there are so many people, unfortunately, support this guy. And if you haven't seen this, of course, Charles Lister, who is a a perfect trumpet for Julani. He says, it is notable that today's raids on ISIS cells in Syria discovered heavily armed cells in an Armenian Christian district of Homs and in the Druze district of Ashrafiyat Sahnaya. So according to Charles Lister, ISIS cells were hiding in Christian neighborhood and in a Druze neighborhood. Do you see where is this going? He's trying to blame the Christians and the Druze for allegedly hosting ISIS in their neighborhoods. This is like giving more carte blanche for Julani to commit more genocide against them. This is what Charles Lister is doing. His hands are soaked in blood. Soaked. And to show you the gravity of this ridiculousness in Syria, you remember there was a suicide bombing in Mar Elias Church in Damascus a few months ago. And back then, the Syrian regime, led by Julani, so Mar Elias Church suicide bombing, this was published on the 24th of June, 2025, right? So 3-4 months ago, they published here on the Syrian state TV that Al-Qaeda Islamist terrorist government announced on the 24th of June that the terrorist brain behind the church suicide bombing was arrested. His name was here Abdel Ilah al-Jamali. And you might think that's a good thing. So where is the problem? So they announced yesterday during this fake raid on ISIS cells that they arrested him again. Look, this is published yesterday, 15 hours ago or so. It's not 24 hours. They again say that they have detained Abdel Ilah al-Jamali. It's the same guy who they allegedly arrested a few months ago in July when the terrorist attack happened in Mar Elias, San Elias church. This is all fake. All fake. Nothing of this is true and nothing of this is serious. However, we live at an absurd times like this, that you have a journal like Der Spiegel. This is a German mainstream media that they say during the historic visit of transitional president al-Sharaa to the US, Syria could join the anti-ISIS coalition. This is how it is reported in Germany, my friend. So if you thought that the mainstream media in Germany is any better, you're wrong. And this is why the mainstream media is dying, whether it's in the US, whether it's in Germany. And this post apparently, after 24 hours, received 3 likes and 3 reposts on X. Right? So I had a lot to cover because we are going to be a little bit out of time. I will try to focus on few things. This is an article, my friends, that you should read, by the way. It's in the Times. Syrian killers who treated victims like dogs get away with murder. This article is so painful. And unfortunately, I cannot show the videos when they are torturing people and forcing them to bark. However, this article is so important because it's a grim, meticulously detailed report on what happened along Syria's Alawite coast after the fall of Assad and the rise of Julani. The investigation centers on the massacres committed on March 7th when armed jihadist majority militias aligned with the new regime descended upon more than 40 Alawite villages in Latakia province. What follows in the reporting is a litany of horrors, right? men being forced to bark like animals before being executed, entire families shot in their homes, elderly and teenagers alike lined up and killed at close range. The killers filmed it all proudly and shared it on social media, mocking their victims and celebrating the abuse. One of the slogans that went viral among the attackers was the same line screamed during the killing: bark, bark, bark. And in just 3 days, over 1,400 Alawite civilians were murdered. Despite the abundance of video evidence and the easy identifiability of many perpetrators, not a single person has been convicted. A government commission eventually concluded that the massacres were not organized, essentially shielding the leadership from responsibility. And although the Syrian justice minister now promises public trials soon, many of the known killers have reappeared freely on social media, mocking the victims and celebrating their actions. This bark thing has become too mainstream among the Julani fan boys, also in Europe. Those who live in Germany, for example. When I post something about Syria, they come to my tweets on X and they say, bark, bark, bark. It's the same Julani thugs demand to their victims before they execute them, and they come to me on social media and they say, bark. If you give these people a weapon, they would kill me without hesitance, right? Even though they live in Germany. They would do it without a blink of an eye. Without blink of an eye. I'm 100% positive about that. So I will speak about something very important, and that is the visit of Julani to the IMF and meeting with the head of the IMF. Because in my opinion, as the world is watching Donald Trump receiving Julani in the White House, something this is very important, and it happened in the shadows, right? Kristalina Georgieva, the head of the IMF, met with Julani. And if you understand what the IMF really is, that meeting tells you more about the future of Syria than any handshake in DC ever could. Because the IMF is not just some nice neutral development bank. Brzezinski, in the Grand Chessboard, for example, openly frames the IMF as tool of American geopolitical power. It is part of the architecture that keeps countries inside Washington's orbit without ever needing tanks or invasions, right? So they don't need to conquer other countries. They in-debt them. And once that happens, policy becomes negotiable. Which brings me straight into what John Perkins describes in Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And honestly, once you hear his mechanism, IMF Julani starts to click. Because here is the basic playbook. The economic hitman doesn't arrive with threats. He arrives with promises, loans, development, shiny new infrastructure, power plants, highways, dams, the kind of stuff that looks like progress from the outside. But the money never really stays in the country. It cycles right back out to foreign corporations. What the country gets is debt, massive unpayable debt. And once that debt becomes a problem, the creditors roll in with solutions. The solutions are, of course, the IMF comes, steps forward like a helpful doctor saying, we can stabilize your economy, but you will need to implement reforms. And those reforms always point in one direction. Privatize your services, open up your markets, devalue your currency, cut your social spending, sell your national assets, basically hand over your economic sovereignty in slow motion, right? That's how the trap works. You don't need coup d'etats if you can rewrite a country's entire economic policy through debt conditionality. And the countries who push back against these IMF measures, Perkins lays out the escalation ladder. First comes persuasion. If that fails, then come covert pressures. And if that still doesn't work, history shows what comes next. Then those are instability, coup d'etats, military intervention dressed up as a humanitarian concern. So it's the carrot, the stick, and the hammer. Now, here is the part nobody talks about. Syria wasn't even a debt-ridden country before the war. In 2010, Syria's sovereign debt was about $7 billion. The economy was roughly $55 to $60 billion. So debt was maybe between 12 to 15% of GDP, extremely manageable, right? For comparison, Lebanon was drowning with debt at around 150% of GDP. Egypt had 33 billion in external debt. Turkey was pushing over 290 billion. Jordan had similar debt to Syria, but with a much smaller economy. So Syria wasn't in the danger zone. It wasn't vulnerable to IMF leverage. It wasn't begging for bailouts. And that independence, you know, the ability to say no is exactly what the IMF system cannot work with. So when you see guys, Kristalina Georgieva meeting Julani, you're watching the prelude to a future where Syria's reconstruction is done on IMF terms, which means Washington's terms, which means privatization, foreign ownership, strategic compliance, and permanent economic dependency baked right into the country's recovery. So if the war reshaped the map with bombs, the IMF is reshaping it with contracts. But that's the part the cameras never show. And that's why this meeting matters more than the headlines about Trump and Julani, in my opinion, because political theater lasts one day. Photo ops are 1 minute, but debt lasts generations, right? And the Syrians will live with this debt forever, unfortunately. But we have a self-selected president who is playing basketball with the head of CENTCOM, basically. In Damascus. So this is where we are at now, at the moment, my friends. Julani playing basketball with the former CIA director. And as our friend William van Wagenen reminds us, you remember when ISIS of Iraq leaders spent years in US prisons in Bucca. And this was the former CIA director there. And he thinks, which I also echo his opinion, that they were deliberately released later and sent to Syria to topple the Syrian government and advance their own objectives, one of which is Israel's objectives of destroying the Syrian army and balkanizing the country. By the way, if you want to read William van Wagenen's book, I have put his book in the description below. I have already hosted him on this channel several times, and I'm not paid by him to say anything, but this book is brilliant. The creative chaos inside the CIA's covert war to topple the Syrian government. If you go to in the description, you will find 2 links you can buy. Those are affiliate links. You're not going to pay anything extra, by the way, if you buy them. But all in all, this is the situation in Syria. It's an unfortunate situation where people celebrate their own demise, as we already discussed with Marwa Osman the other day. My friend Black Thai, thank you so much for your generous support, Habibi. I really appreciate that. So, do you think, guys, I'm just being paranoid about the future of Syria's economy, or do you believe that this is the end of any prospect for Syria to have a national economy, and that from now on the IMF will take over and they will make sure that Syria stays in debt forever, so that they could impose political conditions, so that whoever comes after Julani, their hands would be tied with all these loans and debt, external debt, and they would never be able to correct course ever again. This is the end of any project called Syrian Arab Republic. It's done. Because without a national economy, you're not an independent actor. You're just a number in the pockets of these multi-trillionaires, right? Who will make sure that you stay in debt forever and that you would never be able to reconstruct your country with your own money, with your own resources, with your own hands, They will make sure that you become their slave. And Julani is facilitating that. And whoever says otherwise, and whoever says that's not the case, in my opinion, they belong to this so-called intellectual class who are either compromised by foreign money or simply idiots beyond repair. There is no other way to see that. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to today's stream. I really appreciate you. If you are watching this and you forgot to hit the like button, I would really appreciate it, and I would really be thankful if you just hit the like button and subscribe to Syriana Analysis before leaving this stream. On Wednesday, I'm going to host a longtime friend on this channel. His name is Aqil Hanano. Aqil is probably in my father's age. He's probably 20, 25 years older than me. And he is very smart. I've been looking into his publications since 2011. He is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, a Syrian from Aleppo. And if I'm not mistaken, he is a Muslim Sunni who has been very patriotic in the past 14 years. And he is one of the very few who didn't do what they say in Arabic, takwi'a, because after Assad was overthrown, many people who claimed to be on the side of the Syrian army, they flipped and they started praising Julani. Many, many people, especially in the intellectual class, remember what I said about them. But this guy is very principled, and he didn't change course, and he says things the way they are, that Syria is under occupation and that its leader is an asset, in the intelligence asset. So I would like to have a conversation with him on Wednesday. If you're looking forward to that, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. And I don't know if you can turn on this notification bell so you wouldn't miss that. I would definitely do that. And yeah, if you like this content, my friends, and you like to support this channel, the easy thing to do is to become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. Or you could simply scan this QR code. And if you don't like to use Patreon, there are different other means in the description below. I will see you tomorrow, my friends. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.